Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a Timelord deck profile. So I'm really excited for this one because the deck is absolutely insane. And all of the different boss monsters that you can play in this deck, this is the boss rush deck. To be able to summon out boss monsters against your opponent, to be able to make them have to deal with each individual one, which is really crazy and really cool. And plus it came from my favorite arc of Yu-Gi-Oh, which was Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds, which was an insane series and probably one of my favorite besides the original Duel Monsters. And definitely comment down below what your favorite era of Yu-Gi-Oh has been so far of the animes. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can come part of our notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below because we have all those awesome rewards for you guys, like getting your name description every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, or even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Zafion the Timelord. So Zafion the Timelord is a really awesome card. As you can see, it comes out at 4,000 attack points and it has the ability that all of your Timelords basically share the ability of if your opponent controls a monster, you can normal summon this card without tributing. And it also cannot be destroyed by battle or by card effects. Usually all of your Timelords share that ability. And also it has the ability that neither player takes battle damage from attacks involving this card, which a lot of them share that ability too. Actually, I believe all of them share that ability as well. And at the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, then you inflict 2,000 points of damage to your opponent, and then once per turn during the standby phase, you shuffle this card into the deck, which all of your Time Lords pretty much share the ability to not be targeted by bat or targeted by card effects, not be able to or can't be destroyed by battle or by card effects. Neither player takes battle damage from battles involving them, and they can be normal summoned to your side of the field for free if your opponent controls a monster, and then they all have bonus effects as well, which is pretty interesting. They also all shuffle themselves back into the deck during the standby phase, which is an okay effect. It's the only drawback to the cards, but it kind of helps out because if you normal summon one to your side of the field, then you might want to get another one's effect off later, and you can't do that if you already have one on the field. We then play 3 copies of my personal favorite, which is Yugioh, the Timelord. So this card is really cool because it can't be normal summoned or set, and if you control no monsters, then you can normal summon this card without tributing, and it cannot be destroyed by battle or by card effects. And you take no battle damage from attacks involving this card, and at the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you half your opponent's life points. So this is arguably the most powerful of them all that just halves your opponent's life points, and is why it's my favorite. And it also shuffles itself into the deck after this card or during your next standby phase, which is still a pretty good effect just to be able to half your opponent's life points. We then play 2 copies of Zafion the Timelord. Zafion is pretty good too because it has the ability that if this at the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you shuffle all cards your opponent's graveyard into the deck, and then once per turn during your opponent's when your opponent draws a card, they inflict 1,000 points of damage to your opponent as well, which is a pretty good effect just to be able to instantly burn your opponent for 1,000. We then play 2 copies of Zafion the Timelord. Zafion is really good too because it has the ability that if this card battled, you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to 1 monster your opponent controls attack that battled this card this turn, which is a pretty good effect just to be able to burn your opponent for an additional whatever damage, like up to 3,000 or whatever they have, and you don't take any battle damage from this card either, which is pretty good too. We then played 2 copies of Zafion the Timelord. Zafion's pretty neat because Zafion has one of the most unique effects in the entire deck, because Zafion has a really cool effect that if this card battled, you shuffle all spells and traps your opponent controls into the deck, and if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you get to draw a card, which is pretty good too, to be able to just instantly draw a card from the deck, which is a really, really nice effect. We then play a single copy of Zafion the Timelord. Zafion I really have grown to appreciate a lot more in playtesting this deck, because this card is actually really good because it has the ability that if this card battles, then you shuffle as many cards your opponent controls as possible into the deck, and then draw cards equal to the number of shuffled into their main deck, which is pretty good. Just to be able to just break a board, just to be able to shuffle cards into the deck is really nice. We then play a single copy of Yugioh the Timelord. Yugioh is alright. I just played this card as a 1-of in the deck. It was actually the first Timelord ever released, which is kind of neat. And it has the ability that if this card battles, you return as many monsters on the field as possible to the hand other than this card. And if you do, you inflict 300 points of damage to your opponent for each card returned, which is pretty good just to be able to inflict 300. If you have a full board of 6, then you do 6 times 3, which is basically 1,800, and you can do 1,800 times 2, that if they have monsters and you have monsters, then it's going to usually happen like that. But usually you're just going to have him on the field, so it's going to be usually just 1,800 if your opponent has a full board of 6. If they didn't, you link you. We then play a single copy of Zafion the Timelord. Zafion is pretty neat too. Camion has a really cool effect that if this card battled, then you can shuffle one card your opponent controls into the deck, and if you do, inflict 5 more points of damage to your opponent. And neither player can activate cards in response to this card's effect, so it can't be negated. It just instantly bounces something, which is super nice. And then we play 3 copies of Time Maiden to round out the monsters. So Time Maiden is really good and probably the main card of the entire deck. That if you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if this card is treated as 2 tributes or the tribute summon of a Time Lord monster, and you can tribute this card to add 1 Time Lord monster with 0 attack from your deck to your hand, which is the only one it can't search is actually Zafion, which is kind of bad because Zafion's pretty good to be able to just instantly have a 4K beat stick. It's the card that I use to handle my opponent's boards usually. And you manage this card from your graveyard to special summon any Time Lord with 0 attack from your deck, ignoring its summoning conditions as well. So this card just does so much for the deck just to be able to get you a monster out on your side of the field. It's just ridiculously good, which is why I played this card as a 1 of in the, or 3 of in the deck. Like, I love this card in the deck. It's just so good just to be able to grab those cards out of the deck and be able to just summon them to your side of the field. It's just really, 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 really good. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're playing a single copy of Foolish Burial because you can use Foolish Burial to send your copy of your Time Maiden to get all those awesome effects off with this card. So it's why I play this card as a 1 of in the deck. It also helps you get cards like any of your Time Lords that you feel like you're breaking with any of your Time Lords, which you usually don't break in this deck at all. So you want to play this card as a 1 of in the deck at least. We then play a single copy of 1 for 1 as well. 1 for 1 helps out the deck a lot because you can use 1 for 1 to get out your copy of your Time Maiden onto your side of the field really, really quickly. So this card is ridiculously good at getting your cards onto your side of the field as quickly as possible. And if you're usually drawing multiple normal summons in the deck anyway, so this card's fine. We then play 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. Pot of Extravagance is really good in this deck too because Pot of Extravagance is going to help you out drawing cards. You don't really care about the extra deck all that much, so you're usually just normal summoning out a Time Lord, looking at your opponent and going, do something. I don't care. You're not going to get through it. So basically what this card does is it lets you draw 2 because you don't care about the extra deck. We then play 3 copies of Pot of Duality because you rarely special summon in this deck. So it doesn't really matter. You can look at the top 3 and then add 1 of them from your deck to your hand. So that's why I play this card as a 3 of in the deck. And it's just overall a really good card in the deck, which is why I play this card as a 3 of. We then play 3 copies of Celestial Transformation, which is the final spell card of the deck, which this card is really good to special summon a fairy monster from your hand, but its attack becomes halved and you destroy it during the end phase. But guess what? Half of 0 is still 0. So as long as you don't special summon Zafion, it's always going to come out at that attack point, which is really, really good. And it's just an overall really good card. And also it has the ability that it destroys the monster during the end phase. And all your Time Lords say they can't be destroyed by card effects. So you get to keep them until your next standby phase. So this basically is a free special summon for any Time Lord from your hand. So basically you can get 2 out on your side of the field because you can normal summon 1 and then use this effect to be able to special summon an additional 1 to your side of the field, which is how I usually make cards like my Gustav Max. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're playing 3 copies of Empty Machine. So Empty Machine is a really neat trap card in this deck that has the ability that the first time this card on the field would be destroyed by an opponent's card effect, it is not destroyed. And then once per turn, you can activate one of these effects. You either discard a level 10 monster to draw a card, or if this card is the only card in your spell and trap card zone, you can target a Time Lord monster in your graveyard, shovel it into the deck, and then you get to set 1 Infinite Machine directly from your hand or deck, which we play a single copy of Infinite Machine, which Infinite Machine is pretty good too. To activate this card, you have to send a copy of Empty Machine from your spell and trap card to the graveyard, or spell and trap zone to the graveyard, and then once per turn, this face-up card cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, and then once per turn, you can activate one of these effects to, during your main phase, special summon a Time Lord monster from your hand, and you can also target 1 Time Lord monster in your graveyard, shuffle it into the deck, and then set an Infinite Light directly from your hand or deck, which is pretty good too. But a single copy of Infinite Light. Infinite Light is the final evolution of this trap card, and what it does is absolutely insane. When you activate, if you get to this point, you've probably won the game. So basically what this card does is activate this card by sending 1 face-up Infinite Machine from your spell and trap card zone to the graveyard. And this face-up card cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, and neither player can target Time Lord monster you control with card effects either, or return Time Lord monsters from the field into the deck. So you constantly get to keep all of your Time Lords on your side of the field, even if their effects resolve. And then once per turn, if you control no monsters, you can special summon up to 1 Time Lord from each of your hand, deck, and graveyard, with different names ignoring their summoning conditions. So it instantly gives you 3 monsters on your side of the field, which is pretty crazy. This card is really good. We then play 3 copies of Torrential Tribute because Torrential Tribute just board wipes your opponent and not you because all your monsters can't be destroyed by card effects. So essentially, if you normal summon out a Time Lord monster and it battles, you can even attack your opponent directly and it goes off, which is really crazy. But basically what this card does is it's going to board wipe your opponent and you're going to get to keep your monsters, which is super nice. And then we play 3 copies of There Can Only Be One because I like There Can Only Be One in this deck because basically what this card does is when you activate it, each player can only control 1 monster of each type, which all of our monsters are fairies, but usually we're taking our boss monsters 1 at a time anyways. So it's totally fine for us to just control 1 monster at a time anyways. It's going to hurt your opponent a lot more than it's going to hurt us, which is why I play this card as a 3 of. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. And like I said about the extra deck, if there's anything in the extra deck that you don't have or can't afford, don't worry about it. You don't have to play it. Like, it's not necessary. You don't have to have it. So this is just my particular suggestion. So we're going to be playing 3 copies of Super Rail Cannon Gustav Max. Rail Cannon is really good because it can burn your opponent for 2,000. I would recommend, if there was any one card in this entire extra deck that I say you really do need, it's 3 of this. 3 of this is really important because you can burn your opponent for 2,000. If you don't have it, you don't have to play it. But if you're only picking 1 card in the extra deck that you need for this deck, it's this. We then play 2 copies of 61 Rail Cannon Superdora. Superdora is really nice because it can just instantly make itself immune to everything, which is super nice. And then you play 2 copies of Juggernaut Libby because, again, OTK your opponent like crazy, which is a super good effect. We then play 2 copies of Unicorn as well. 2 copies of Unicorn just spin stuff, which is super nice. You're usually not going to go into Unicorn, but it's there in case you need it. It's probably one of the best extra deck monsters in the entire game, which is why I played it as a 2 of. We play 2 copies of Phoenix because it can pop spells or traps, which again is why I'm playing it as a 2 of. 2 copies of IP Masquerena because you can go IP into a copy of Unicorn, which is pretty easy. And then we play 2 copies of Linkriba because you can use your copy of Time Maiden to go into this card if it does get negated on your side of the field. So there is ways to actually play around it with the copy of Linkriba. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a really cool deck to play with. I really recommend that if you guys are teaching somebody to play Yu-Gi-Oh, this is a pretty good deck to just teach somebody to play because it's an overall really easy deck to learn and it's fun. Like, this deck is really fun to play because it's fun to play, but it's not fun to play against because it's really hard to out and deal with a lot of the monsters, but it's pretty good. So anyways, guys, this is Dark Armed Duelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Definitely tell me what you think of this deck down in the comments down below because it is really fun to play around with, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.